Men are dying to have connection. We're more in touch with each other than ever through the internet and social media and cell phones, but we're less connected than ever, and people are less connected to themselves. I was in real estate just full time. I was one of the top 10 agents in my state for a decade. In 2019, I had a unique year. I sold almost 500 homes, and I sold the most expensive home ever in the state of Utah at that time. It was $32.5 million, and made a 7-figure commission check in about 20 minutes. And at the same time, I'd been really diving into what my life purpose was, why was I here? And I had this epiphany, about a month after I sold that house. I was like, you need to do something more impactful. Here's what I realized, Clay, and it was really shocking to me. I knew that there used to be these places where men went to connect, especially pre-internet. There was just all these places where men would go, and that's how they would talk about their feelings and express things and share what's going on with them. And that doesn't really exist in today's society as well. And I had a unique opportunity to spend a night with my father about 1.5 years ago. We just talked for 5-6 hours one night. And he started telling me about this, and I, knew how to coach it out of him. But I was like, well, Dad, what were you feeling when that was happening? And he really opened up and shared maybe some of these things with me. And I remember at one point I asked him, I said, when was the last time you shared any of this? He's like, I've never been able to share any of this.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think that men necessarily were as in tune with their feelings, but they had more deep connected friendships where they felt safe to at least just be with another man. And so the combination of those two things is really powerful.
Welcome, everyone, to the Beyond the Cover podcast. My intent with creating this podcast was to provide a platform where men can speak openly about their journeys with mental health without fear of judgment while doing so. While I, the host, or you, the listener, may not agree with everything or anything that a certain guest says for that matter, my focus is not to decipher what is right or wrong. Rather, it's to gain a better understanding of why somebody thinks and acts the way that they do. And with this understanding, we will begin to make better sense of our own lives and the world around us. So join me as we open the books into these men's journeys and dissect the pages within. Jimmy Rex, welcome to Beyond the Cover.
Dude, thanks for having me, man. Super stoked to be on.
And I also am equally as excited because you're a guy that, as I did my research, I realized you're ahead on the path. As far as where I want to see myself going with advocacy around mental health for men and women. I don't want to exclude women, but what I found was, people really resonate with what they can relate to. And so I started with, I said men's, but then, I have a primarily female audience. 93% of my audience is women. So I thought, well, I don't want to exclude them. So I guess I'll make it a mental health podcast.
Well, the best way to help the women is to help the men, right? I mean, ultimately, they benefit the most when we can help the guys, dig into a couple of these things that are holding us back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, again, as I've started, I have women on my podcast and we can talk about their relationships with men. And so then also those women will then I'll have men come on and they can go, oh, I didn't realize that's what's happening inside the mind of a man. Because I think men and women, we are just hardwired completely different, and not everybody, there's exceptions to every rule, but oftentimes women, they're more emotional focused and men are more, rationale focused. And I've met women that are more rationale focused and women that are more rationale focused and women that are more.
Well, I love what you're doing too, because as men, we just don't know these things. We're not taught it. We don't know. I've been experimenting and exploring a lot these the differences between the masculine and the feminine. And it's true. It's women just want to have their experience. They want to feel the emotions. They want to be able to experience everything that they can and feel it. Whereas we're men, it's if we say something, that's what we mean, right? Yeah. It's very logical. And I think where a lot of guys get in trouble is they don't understand that difference. And so don't allow women to just have their emotional experience or be able to just be in that energy. And so I've been really pouring into trying to learn this as much as possible, because for me, it would have changed everything for me my entire life if I had just understand these differences between how a woman wants to experience life versus how a man is experiencing it.
Yeah. And something just came into my head that I think to me that makes sense is women want to feel it, men want to fix it. And it's not that women don't want to fix it, but it's men go straight into fix it mode. Mm-hmm. And I used to do that when I was with my exes. I'd say they'd bring a problem to me and I'd say, okay, well, I think you could do this and this and this and this. And they just look at me and they're like, I just want to vent.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but don't you want to stop talking about it, because if we fix it, you won't need to talk about it anymore. But then I found out that they're like, hey, you're almost in a way minimizing what I'm feeling, because you're just blowing right past the feeling. And also it's kind of a slap in the face, because it's almost as if you're telling me what to do as if I don't know. I just want to feel it and let it out. Well, I grew up in a household of all boys. We didn't do that.
Right.
We didn't feel things out as they came. We just dealt with them. So Jimmy, on the cover, you're a men's mental health advocate, a personal development guru, and a former real estate professional. Do you still dabble in real estate?
Yeah, I still have a real estate team.
Okay.
Last year I think sold a couple hundred properties still. So it's very active real estate team. But
you
I have
you are a monster.
I have a great real estate partner.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of the face of it at this point.
Yeah.
So I bring clients in, throw big events and parties and things like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So not former, you are deep in it, because a few hundred properties a year is nothing to scoff at. But then I love that you're the creator of What, which is We Are the They. When I first heard that, can you take me through how that name came to be, and what does it stand for?
Yeah, because it's a little bit of a tongue twister, right? Like a lot of people will, say like that's kind of a dumb name. It's hard to say, but then I explain it and they go, "Oh, I love that." And so, long story short, I used to be a part of a group that would go undercover and help rescue kids being sex trafficked in foreign countries, and had the opportunity to go on 13 of these different missions, and we had a lot of success. And one of the missions in particular, we were in Latin America, and it was super dangerous. Like, they had a perimeter set. They had bodyguards. I mean, they had their guns on them. So if at any point they knew what we were there for, that we were undercover, we were dead. And so when I got back from this mission, we did the rescue, we did the takedown, and my girlfriend picked me up from the airport, and I'm telling her this story. I'm going through, and I'm so excited telling her about it. And she pulls over and she goes, "Hey, I don't actually like that you're doing this." Mm-hmm. And it threw me off. I was like, "What are you talking about? This is, did you not just hear what I said? We rescued these kids." She says, "Well, yeah, but it's a bad environment. It's really dangerous." And I was like, "Well, this is gonna be part of my life's mission going forward." And she said, "Well, why can't they just go do it?" And without even thinking, I said, "Well, there is no they. We are the they." And when I said that, I was like, "Oh, damn, that's like profound." It became the motto for my life. I tattooed it on my arm. And so when I opened my men's coaching program, it became the obvious name for what I wanted it to be. It just represents, like, so often in life, we see something that we don't like or we want to change, and we just want somebody else to take care of it. And what we believe is like, well, if you want something to happen, it's like you be the person to make that change.
And what? Okay, that I love that, because the they is the collective. Mm-hmm. And so you're like, yes, we are the ones to do it. As in, it's saying there's a group of courageous men looking to do the work. And make a difference, which, dude, I love that. That's incredible how it just came to you. Do you believe are you spiritual? Do you believe in divine intervention?
Big time. Yeah.
Would you say that was a moment of divine intervention where it's just like the words came flying in and you're like, that's it?
Yeah. And I think, like, truth, like when we hear it, we just know it, right? I remember when I said it, just shot shivers down my whole body. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like that was so profound. And, I've said things before where I'll be coaching or teaching or something, and I'll say something, I'll be like, where the hell did that come from? I've never even thought that before, but and it's like, where does a thought come from? Where does inspiration come from? It all comes from source or God or whatever you want to call it. And so, I think I'm a big believer that, everything's guided if we're paying attention.
Yeah. So you spend a majority of your time, from what I at least see on social media, helping other men, and doing the work and diving deep into mental health and bringing everybody else up with you and struggling together and winning together as well. What's the origin story to you wanting to impact others? I mean, how far back does this go when you said, I think I want to make a difference in the lives of men?
Yeah. So I was in real estate just full time. I was one of the top 10 agents in my state for a decade. In 2019, I had a unique year. I sold almost 500 homes, and I sold the most expensive home ever in the state of Utah at that time. It was $32.5 million, and made a 7-figure commission check in about 20 minutes. And at the same time, I'd been really diving into like what my life purpose was, why was I here, and I had this epiphany like about a month after I sold that house. I was like, you need to do something more impactful, and it was clear as day to me. It was like pure inspiration. You talk about, getting messages from God. And I was like, okay, well, what does that look like? And I remember I started telling my friends, dude, I think I might go out of real estate and do something more impactful. And they were just like, dude, maybe sit on this for a minute,
Especially because I don't know if people realize, but when you're doing 500 houses in a year and you're playing up in that range, I mean, you're making serious money.
Yeah,
You're making retirement money.
Yeah,
Potentially
I was
in a year.
making $3 to $5 million a year for several years in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was like clockwork. I was spending half my year out of the country traveling. I've been to 114 countries. Like, it was what you build up to your whole life. But I just knew I needed to do something more impactful. About that same time, an agent that built his business the same way that I did, he had died collecting a rent check at a fourplex that he owned. And I just remember watching the news, and every single story, everything in the paper was just like, realtor dies, realtor. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if I die tomorrow and all I'm known as a realtor, like, not that that's a bad career, but I'd be a little sad that that's, what I was known as. And so it really got me just looking inward of like, all right, what would I do if I didn't do real estate? Where could I have more impact? And the thing that I'd had a book come out. I talked a lot about getting out of your comfort zone and not living a safe life and all that. And I kind of understood that the thing that I do best is help put people in uncomfortable situations where they grow.
Yeah.
And then I help men connect on a deep level. So all my friends had met through me. I was getting a lot of messages too on Instagram that were like, people saying, hey, where do I find a group of friends like you guys have? I'm looking for a group of good guy friends. I don't know where to find it at. And I realized, I know exactly how to do this.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of leaned into it. I'd spent 20 years going to every mastermind seminar, read every book you can imagine about self-development. And I just said, if I take all the best things that I've learned and I put them into one program, I think I can create something pretty special.
Yeah.
And so that's really was the impetus for me to try this. And so I launched it. And here's what I realized, Clayton. It was really shocking to me. I knew that there was this vacancy there used to be these places where men went to connect, whether it was the barber shop or the game or whatever. They just pre-COVID, I feel like, and especially pre-internet, there was just all these places where men would go, and that's how they would talk about their feelings and express things and share what's going on with them. And that doesn't really exist in today's society as well. And so when I launched this program, I was hoping I could get 50 guys to sign up for my initial program. And I had 147 guys apply in 8 hours.
Wow.
It was crazy. And I realized, I'm like, man, there is something that men are missing.
Yeah. And
so I just went full board, went all in on this, turned my real estate team over to my business partner, and been doing it ever since. I've been able to coach almost 1,000 men now. And so, but there's just this need. It's like men are dying to have connection. We're more in touch with each other than ever through the internet and social media and, cell phones, but we're less connected than ever. And people are less connected to themselves. And so what I really focused on with this program is how can I help men connect to themselves and then therefore be able to connect with others. And that's what I've really focused on.
Where do you think we're at nowadays as far as with overall men and mindfulness? Because you made an interesting comment just there. At least it was interesting to me in the sense of saying, like we're less connected than ever. I think that's very true as far as from a collective standpoint. I mean, social media actually is not as connective as what we think it is,
right.
And especially with the technology in our faces as we're walking around, we're at dinner and everyone's got their phones in their face, or you're walking in the mall and it's like you're staring down at your phone. And so there's all these, not even just the eye contact is not what it once was, where people are walking by and making, it's like now you're just completely glued to this piece of technology. And so I do believe that we're less connected than ever. But I also, and I'm 31 years old, so I'm not, old enough to know like prior generations as far as how things were. But talking with my dad, they were hard workers, and I don't know if they ever had those discussions that I'm aware of. So like were men having these, you talked about the barber shops and how men were having these places of gathering. And I mean, I'm sure you work with men that are older as well. Mm-hmm. Was this prevalent back before social media and we're just not aware of it? I mean, did men used to be extremely mindful and then everybody went backwards with technology? Because my understanding was that, I grew up and it was like, it's the movies and TV shows all depicted a real man as the guy that was Rambo or, a football player and was tough and didn't show emotion. Mm-hmm. And so my belief was that all the men prior to this, like from growing up and prior to my generation, didn't show emotion ever.
Yeah, I think that as a society, we've done a great job of helping men in general be able to feel safe, just being more emotional, right? Mm-hmm. Being able to stand in that masculine where, sometimes you do just have to shoulder things. You got to just wear it. You got to carry things. And you can't run home and cry to your family about these things or they're going to feel unsafe. And so like sometimes the man's responsibility is to just shoulder a lot of responsibility and burden. But at the same time, I think one of the beautiful shifts that we've had as a society, like you're saying, is that men are more willing to tap into maybe that emotional side than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's lacking more is those close friendships. I think a lot of times for a man, the best thing you can do is just go be in the presence of the other guy, not have answers and not need to open up about your feelings, but you're just sitting there. I remember I had a buddy whose mom died a couple of years ago, and I went over to visit him, and I knew, I was smart enough to know, I just sat there for 4 hours and we watched a ball game on the TV and didn't say a word, right? But that's what he needed. And we had more of those kind of connections. What we haven't had is men really opening up. I had a unique opportunity to talk, spent a night with my father about 1.5 years ago. One of the main reasons I wanted to have this program is because my dad, 95% of the time, was amazing. But that 5% could be a real bitch.
Yeah. And
he never had anyone he could open up to. His friends just fed into victim mentality and, ego and some of these things. And so for me, watching my dad growing up, I remember thinking like, oh, if he had these safe places where he could have talked about what was going on, his dad died when he was 19, and he got a lot of responsibility of the family, and then things went wrong with some of his siblings, and he carried that burden. And we had this cool opportunity where we sat and we just talked for like 5-6 hours one night.
Mm-hmm.
And he started telling me about this, and I, knew how to coach it out of him. But I was like, well, Dad, what were you feeling when that was happening? Like, and he really opened up and shared maybe some of these things with me. And I remember at one point I asked him, I said, when was the last time you shared any of this? He's like, I've never been able to share any of this.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think that men necessarily were as in tune with their feelings, but they had more deep connected friendships where they felt safe to at least just be with another man. And so the combination of those two things is really powerful. Mm-hmm. That is, I think, what's causing this awakening of a lot of men today. Are they're not afraid to talk about their feelings.
Yeah.
And if we can mix that with close connected relationships where you don't have to wear a mask, you wear that mask of success or being the athlete or the womanizer, whatever it might be. If you're able to take that off, because what really happens, a lot of guys, most of the guys that I coach, when they come into the program, they all say the same thing. They're like, well, if people knew who I really was, they wouldn't love me. And they think they're alone. They think they're the only one going through this thing. So I do a series of exercises to help them see that, like, no, dude, you're just like everybody else. And when they take that mask off and they're loved for all of their faults and all of their, weakness and everything else, then all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't need to feel this burden of, not being good enough or not being lovable. And so they're able to accept love, a lot of them, for the first time. Mm-hmm. And so it goes so much deeper, and you see this change immediately, because when all of a sudden they feel worthy to be loved by others, they start loving themselves. And I think that's this place that we're at now as a society for men and people in general, where we have this really unique opportunity to take those masks off, to be a little bit vulnerable, and to truly accept the love that people are trying to pour into us.
Yeah. There's so many things that you said, and you said it so eloquently, but I want to really focus on one of the last things that you said, which is you're talking about the mask, and you also alluded to labels. How often are you breaking labels with men? And I ask this because I feel like it's very common when you ask a man, who are you? They'll tell you what they do, but not really what they are. So for one, I want to actually, before we jump into, are you seeing this a lot with other men? How do you define yourself? When somebody asks you, who are you? What do you tell them?
Yeah, it's one of those trick questions, right? It is a little bit hard to figure out what to say. I refer to myself as, I'm a beautiful mess. I'm just a beautiful mess, man. Yeah. I am so uniquely designed to screw things up, but love himself still. And I love the whole sloppiness that is life. I love all of it. I love to win. I love to lose. I love to experience things. I'm curious about life in general. And so for me, I think that this whole thing, if we can embrace that, we don't have to get this life perfect. There's no right way to do life. There's no perfect way to do this whole thing. And so when you can embrace that, I'm just a guy that's loving this whole experience that I get to call life, all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so for me, I don't know, that's the best way I can define it for myself.
No, what I find interesting is I've met men from different walks of life that are very cerebral. They're incredibly mindful. And it's interesting because some men will go very in depth. You say, who are you? And they'll give you a really narrow, very specific answer. But then what you gave was a pretty broad answer. It's able to flow and encapsulate many things. You're not really like defining yourself and saying I fit in this box. You're saying I'm a beautiful mess. I could be over there, up here, down there. And I feel similarly as far as if someone asks me what I am, I say I am me. And it's almost not really telling. It's like, what does that mean? It's like, well, I mean, I'm just me, as in pay attention to the present moment and you'll figure out what I am. And so that's, I don't like to go any bit more narrow than that. You know, I've tried to jump in deeper, but I'm like, anything I say could have an endpoint.
Yeah. Well, anytime we focus in too much on something, we usually get fixated on the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
All pain in life comes from unmet expectations, usually of ourselves or others.
Yeah.
And so the more that you can just go, you know what, this is me today. And I reserve the right to change any part of this at any time, any belief I have, any opinion I have, any part of me that I think, you know, I'm just seeking to get this thing right the best that I can.
Yeah.
And in that, I'm willing to allow myself to be stupid, to look dumb and whatever it might be. But ultimately, it's just this human experience that I am. And I think that allows you to wake up every day and just be excited about whatever comes. You know, I pray every morning that God will lead me to the people that need me. And so I just kind of, whatever happens, I'm just, oh, it's part of that program. It's part of whatever I'm supposed to have happen. And all of a sudden you don't have bad days. You don't have bad moments. You're just like, oh, this is part of whatever, for whatever reason I needed to be in this experience today.
Yeah.
And it really allows you to live your life without this fear of getting it wrong, without this fear of, you know, maybe letting others down, and just experience everything you can.
Yeah. How much of life, in your opinion, is perspective?
Oh, all of it. Like, I mean, you give literally 10 different people, the same thing can happen to them, and they all attach a different meaning to it. You know, Tony Robbins is one of my favorites. He's so brilliant, but he says, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I love that. It's all about the perspective you put on it, right? Like, something can happen to you and you can either be happening for you or to you, first off. But the same 10 people will see it, and one of them will think it's the greatest gift of their life, whereas one of them will think it's the reason why everything has gone to hell in his life and he has this horrible existence.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you 1,000%. I think what's so powerful is when you get a culmination of men together in a room, when you get enough of them in the room, you start to realize that there's commonalities amongst the adversity that these men have faced. And so what happens is you see that one guy ends up saying that was the best thing that ever happened to me. And the other guy says, well, that was what really ruined me as a human being. And I can't figure out how to get over it. And it's like, but now you have someone that's saying, I'm so grateful. I went through almost the exact same thing and I would do it 10 times over. So you can see it starts to rattle that brain of the other individual and say, how can you find the positive amongst that? How did that not destroy you? And it's like, well, it did, you know, until I was able to understand why I had to go through it. I love how you talked about it. It's like, it can happen to you or for you. And then I had somebody tell me it can also happen through you. And so they took it to that next step. They said, yeah, the happening to me, why is it happening to me is when the victim mindset kicks in. You know, why is it happening for me? You're able to step beyond that and say, okay, hey, where's the lesson within this? But they say then the higher part is, you know, why is it happening through me? As in, like, who's watching, who's observing? You know, this is bigger purpose, you know, bigger than me. You know, why is it happening through me? So I thought that was awesome. It made sense to me. And I'm like, you know, we really are like the observer of life, you know, and we're all paying attention to those around us. When you have men join the group, what are some of the biggest reasons that men come and join? I mean, what are they struggling with when they come to you? Is it finances? Is it just overall struggling with emotion, not having anybody to relate to? I mean, what are the top reasons?
Yeah, no, you get a little bit of everything, but I think the most prevalent thing that I see is people, whether they have people in their life or not, they feel like they're either stuck or they feel like they're not around the right people to get them to where they're trying to be, right? Or like to get to the next level. And I think those of us that I've had great friends in my life, my whole life, that push me and that support me and that hold me accountable. I think if you've never had that, you don't appreciate what is missing. I think one of the most important things we can have as men is other men in our lives that do push us to be our best, that have a high expectation of us, but love us regardless, that can hold space for us, that allow us to, you know, try things and not have to get it right every time. And so I think the thing that more than anything that is driving people to join my group or groups like it is just this feeling of wanting to do more, wanting to be more. It's not a group of losers. A guy the other day, it's funny, he just joined my program pretty recently, and he was worried it was just going to be a bunch of broken men. And, and he got in and he realized very quickly, a couple of my guys just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro last week. One of my dudes is worth 9 figures. They just set up a new business this way. It's just all of them. I could brag about hundreds of these guys. They're really, kicking ass in life. And he said, man, I was worried that this was going to be, I wanted to grow and learn, but I was afraid this was going to be a bunch of broken men, but it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
He's like, I've never met so many guys that push me to want to be more in my entire life.
Yeah.
And it just is hard to go through life alone. It's hard to push yourself when there's no one around you, like holding you to a higher standard. And so I think every one of us innately has this God-given desire to be more, to want to be the best version of ourselves, to reach our highest self. And so I think when we get around the right people, we quickly recognize that, oh, these people are driving me towards that. And that can be very intoxicating. Whereas, if you're just around people that are allowing you to be maybe not the best version of yourself, or wallow in your pity, or whatever it might be, or, holding you back, I think it's important to recognize which people in your life you need to spend less time with and which one to spend more. And I know for me, every time I get around people that are doing more, it just inspires me to want to have more in my own life and to be a better person in every way.
How would somebody identify that they're around the wrong group? I have my thoughts on it, and I've definitely switched up my friend group as I become more mindful and as I've taken this deep dive into mental health and put the right people around me. But say somebody's sitting here listening, they're like, okay, I could have the wrong people around me. How do I know? How do I know when someone's right for me and when someone's wrong?
So I'd ask a couple questions. Number one is, do they make you want to be a better version of yourself? Like when you're with them, are you your best self or are you playing down? Right. The second thing you're going to ask is, when you share good news with them, how do they react? I think that's a really important question, because the people that truly we should be spending more time around, they should celebrate you completely, and really pay attention to how people react when you have good news. And then ultimately, just, do you truly enjoy being with them, or do you feel like at this point you're doing it out of an obligation, or do you feel drained from them, or do you feel full of energy after hanging out with them?
Yeah,
I know when I hang out with the right people, it just, everything in my life seems to be easier. And when I hang out with the wrong people, they do subtle things. They'll say things like, they'll question your character, but they'll do it in subtle little ways, and they just make you kind of start to feel worse about yourself. And so I think ultimately it's do they make you feel like a better person?
Yeah. I love that. It's cool when I see synchronicity amongst, and it's also validating for me as I go through my own journey. But I couldn't agree more with you. When you're around the right people, you get an energy boost. But so much of my life I spent around the wrong people that I was trying to fit in with. I thought I needed to be a certain type of person, especially when I was in the medical sales industry, and I had to blend in. And I was told, hey, you don't want the surgeons to know you're in the room, because if they know you're there, like, that means you're doing something wrong, you're standing out, like, blend in. And so I had this blend in mentality of, I need to be professional, but I need to look a certain way, high and tight haircut. I earrings, these are new for me. I didn't want them at first, because I always liked them, but I was like, oh, I can't have those. Men don't have those, like, earrings are for women, So I was concerned about this, how I'd be seen with my sexuality. And so it was all about this blending in and just trying to, like, just be this blank canvas. And what the problem was that I attracted a lot of people that were, doing the same thing. And so I felt drained, and it's like, well, that makes sense. You talk to somebody, you're expending energy. Therefore you're going to feel drained afterwards. But that was completely wrong. As I started being myself and diving in and expressing myself authentically, I started pulling that same energy. And it's like, I could run through a wall after I'm with the right people, and so it's the feeling. It's like, I walk out and it's like, how did I feel when I went, out for drinks with that person, or out into an event or on a date? It's like, it's a feelings focused, business or endeavor, really is what it is. And it's tapping into the feminine energy of the feeling. It's like, did you feel good after you spent time with them? Yes. Okay. Then it's probably somebody you should keep around, at least for another interaction or more.
Yeah. And I always say, like, can you be yourself around them? Can you truly, there's no better feeling in the world than being with friends where you don't have to worry about what you're saying. They're not going to judge you on it. They're not going to think differently of you. They just love you and they know you. Like, it's the most freeing feeling. Just be there and just be able to just be yourself 100%. Right. Yeah. And so, like, that's another thing I ask people is, like, Well, when you're with the people that you want to be around, do you feel like you can 100% be yourself? Do they accept this version of you? Or are you showing them a version that you hope they like?
Yeah.
Because the danger in that is even if they do like you won't believe it because you know that you've only shown them a version that you want them to like. So you don't feel that love, you don't feel that support. And so you've got to be able to truly be yourself when you're with those people.
Yeah, you're so right, because what people will think is you love the character I'm playing.
Correct. You only love this version I'm showing you.
Yeah, and that's so powerful, and that's why you feel empty. And also then it takes energy to have to uphold that image of like, hey, because when I'm just myself, I don't have to think about it.
Correct.
When I'm in the room with people that actually love me for me, I just say whatever's unfiltered coming off the top of my head. But I remember going back to when I was trying to be something that I thought people wanted me to be, that I would even think about the way that I laughed. And I remember I had this moment where I was in high school and Wiz Khalifa had this really distinct laugh. And everyone thought it was so cool and thought he was so cool as a rapper. And so I remember one day I was at a house party and I laughed like Wiz Khalifa. It was like this, and it was something completely forced.
Yeah.
And everyone turned to look at me and was like, "What the hell is that?" And I remember that's how hard I was trying to be something cool, that I forced this laugh that instantly got identified as an imposter, and thankfully got called out for it and didn't work. But it was. I'm like, I was always looking for the thing that I could do to be cool. And then I just started being myself in like the last 6 to 8 months or whatever. And it's like, I pushed away a lot of people. A lot of people think that I'm cringy and dorky and just awkward. But then there's a certain people that they gravitate very quickly to me because like, that's goofy. He's just goofy.
And you just find your people. And also, by the way, people love that because they get to put their guard down around you, right? Yeah. Like at a young age, I somehow understood this. When I was doing real estate, this is really what boosted my career. I was selling homes to all these rich guys because I would just be myself. And I don't know where I learned this or how I picked it up, but they loved me. They wanted to be around me. I was opening doors I had no business being in the room just by being myself. And I would make inappropriate jokes and I'd laugh at myself and I'd embarrass myself. And these guys loved me for it because like, I can finally put my guard down around this guy. I don't have to pretend to be this, this suit and tie guy every time I'm with this dude. And so I ended up opening all these doors. And so I kind of learned it at an early age to just be myself. Yeah. And I have plenty of people that I'm sure I trigger the hell out of that don't necessarily like me. And it's like, that's okay though, because you find your tribe. When I launched my men's group, I hate to say it, but I've had probably 300 dudes join the program. I think 5 have been vaccinated, but like you find your tribe, you find your people. Like if a guy comes into my group and he doesn't see the world the same way as me, he's probably not going to like me. And I'm okay with that. It's like, I'm not for everybody, but for the people that I can help and that I am for, I know I'm uniquely designed to be that person. And so if I'm trying to be somebody else, not only am I going to miss my own tribe, but eventually these people aren't going to like me anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I heard this really awesome phrase: you can never say the wrong thing to the right person, but you can never say the right thing to the wrong person.
Amen.
And that was super powerful. When that was said to me, actually about a year ago, that was a massive shift. It was said from a complete stranger that I just happened to be vulnerable with because we both started talking about mental health and sat with him later that night up on a rooftop. And he said that to me. And I was like, it's so crazy that I just met you probably 5 hours ago. And you just said something to me that's life-changing. And it's really, it can be one conversation, the power of one conversation that can change a life, can save a life, to the extreme measures. There was this retired San Francisco Highway Patrol. I'm blanking on his name, but he had saved apparently like 300 lives of people that were
Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, standing over the Golden Gate Bridge, ready to jump off of it. And this man had a conversation for people for about an hour, sometimes less, sometimes more, and made them feel seen and heard. And ultimately, they decided to step back over the railing. And there's a stranger that was able to save someone's life off of one conversation. So it shows you the power of just communicating with one another. What do you see as the biggest resistance that men face with taking that leap to be vulnerable?
Yeah, men have been punished for being vulnerable. That's really what it's all about, right? Like they learned somewhere in their life that if I show weakness, it's going to be used against me. Mm-hmm. If I show vulnerability, I'm going to be left out, or whatever that might look like, whether that was with a woman, with their parents, with whoever it might be. And so unfortunately, a lot of times we have this fake, this false identity that, maybe if I do put my guard down, I'm going to be hurt. Mm-hmm. And the truth is you might, and there's no guarantees you're not going to, get destroyed. But ultimately you start finding out that this vulnerability is a superpower. The thing that you think makes you the most unlovable will actually connect more people to you than anything else you could have ever shared.
Yeah.
But until you're willing to jump off that cliff and really share that and experience it with the right people, it just feels really scary.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest problem that we face, and you see it more and more. It happens all the time. And we gravitate so quickly to people that are vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
The best podcast guests and hosts and all these people, they're putting their guard down and they're letting themselves be vulnerable. And they're saying things where you're just like, oh my gosh, I would never say that. But then you're like, wait, I would, because it just connects other people to you. And the thing we think makes us the most unlovable is usually the thing, we're most qualified to help the person we used to be.
Yeah.
And so if we're willing to just put our armor down and let ourselves be a little vulnerable, we can connect and help so many people in this life.
Yeah. Where does ego play a role in all of this?
Ego, it's a fascinating one to me. My current girlfriend, she all the time says, you have the biggest ego, but it's not, there has to be some ego to get something done.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I can't think of anyone that has a bigger ego than Tony Robbins. Thank God he does, because nobody would get anything done if they don't. You have to have this unwavering belief, this self-confidence that you can do the thing. And I think that's where a lot of ego comes in. Obviously, false sense of ego and false confidence. And those, we see a lot of stuff with, fake gurus and, baller busters and all that kind of stuff, where you see people pretending to be something they're not.
Yeah.
And that's a really dangerous side of the ego. If you really know, I've studied the ego quite a bit, and its only job is to keep you alive. And so the whole thing that it's doing is just trying to tell you what to do to stay alive. It's not meant to make you happy. It's meant to make you, survive and replicate. So a lot of times you don't want to look stupid. So you don't approach the girl you have a crush on, maybe because your ego's like, no, she's going to reject you. That's your ego talking.
Yeah.
Or you're afraid to put yourself out there because no, people are going to think you're weak. People won't like you, whatever. That's your ego.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it keeps a lot of people from doing the thing that will bring them the most happiness.
Yeah.
Because everything we want usually is on the other side of that fear. And if we can recognize the ego, I call it the drunk monkey. It's like if you can picture a drunk monkey on your shoulder, just trying to keep you from doing everything that's going to cause you a little bit of pain. But if you just see it as this drunk monkey, then all of a sudden you can tell it to shut up and go do the thing.
Yeah.
And I think the way that you kind of play with the ego and kind of fall in love with the ego is understanding that it is there to protect you, but that you don't need to create this false sense of identity in order for you to be loved and to be enough.
Yeah. And do you believe in ego death? Do you feel that it's basically inevitable towards a man's final form, like getting to that place? Because I experienced ego death. I had heard that term thrown around. I'm a big believer in ego death and resurrection, though. Mm-hmm. So I don't like to just end it at death. I hear that you got to kill your ego. It's like, I believe that you maybe do take it to that place, but you got to bring it back. Because as you said, it's your sense of self. It's the thing that protects you. And I also think that there's a positive side to the ego. When everybody was trashing me, I was the one looking in the mirror at myself saying, look at you. Look at what you've built around you. Mm-hmm. Look at how you physically look. Look at all the triumphs you've had, the resiliency. If anybody can get through it, it's you. You've already went through so many trials and tribulations. You can do it again. So that's the ego. Also that's hyping you up and saying, if anyone can do it, it's me. But I believe that there's the resurrection aspect where it's like, you got to live with your ego. You don't just kill it and say I got full control of you. You no longer exist. But it's the balance is what I've found is so do you allow your ego to have its moments? For me personally, this question is stemming from, I will allow anger to come out. If somebody asks me, how did that make you feel? I'm going to let my ego speak here for a second. And then I'll go down a path of allowing the anger to arise. And then I'll just take a deep breath and I'll say, that's the ego and how it feels. I know deep down that I shouldn't harbor that feeling, but it's still there. Mm-hmm. So it's almost, I acknowledge my ego and I'm like, I still believe that anger is also can be a positive.
Very much so. Yeah.
Somebody breaks into my house, I need to have that anger kick on and kick their ass, especially if it's a matter of life or death, or if somebody, disrespects a loved one, I need to be there to defend them. Right. So, anger has its place. It also can be a great driver. But how do you balance it?
Well,
in
and I
your life?
think, I 100% agree. I think that, like I said earlier, like the ego is what drives us to do great things.
Yeah.
Anger is one of the best tools to get things done. I think more things has been accomplished in this world because of anger than probably anything else. Maybe love or whatever, but it's using it as a tool as opposed to, it's being, instead of using it reactionary, it's using it, on purpose or whatever else that might look like.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the dance of life is starting to be in touch enough with our emotions that we're the ones that get to use those as a tool, as opposed to letting those run the software that makes all of our decisions. And so, I think that there has to be this healthy amount of being able to understand your own feelings, being okay with your feelings, and your ego being something that drives you to do good, or to just do better, like you were saying. But I think too many people start to make themselves wrong, right? Like if you can wake up every day, like I wake up every day and I'm like, I love that I get to be me today. I get to go play Jimmy Rex and I love being this character.
Yeah.
And it's, some people hear that and they're like, this dude is so into himself. It's like, no, it's not that at all. Is that I just really have gotten to a point where I can appreciate the life that I get to live. And I think that's a really healthy thing to do.
Yeah.
And I don't do it because it's like I'm trying to satisfy all my own needs and desires. It's like, because I have gotten to a point where I can work on myself and do these things, I now get to pour into other people. And so one thing that's really important, I think, with the ego is having people around you that love you enough to not just boost you full of hot air. I have a couple brothers, man. And for 2 years, both of them were like, hated me. And I was like, I hated this. They're two of my best friends. Both of them named one of their kids after me, legit. And, but they did not like the direction I was going with my life a few years ago. And I always looked at it as like, I was like a hot air balloon, and all my friends and all the people on the internet, they're pumping you full of hot air. And they're the two that were like staked in the ground to make sure that I knew how to freaking fly the balloon before it took off.
Yeah.
And it forced me to look at myself in ways that, man, I did not like. And I had to be real honest about myself. And one of my brothers, he just wouldn't talk to me. And I was just really pissed about it. And I was like, dude, what is your deal? And he wrote me this very articulate text. And it was so much more thoughtful than I was expecting. It was so much more well thought through. And I just was like, shit, like, dude, actually, I just thought he was irrationally mad at me. And I was like, oh, he's actually thought this through quite a bit. And I had to look at each thing one by one and go, okay, do I own this or do I not? And some of it I didn't have to own. Some of it wasn't true. Yeah. Some of it I did. And I was like, man, I really need to look at, there's some things in here I need to, improve about myself. And it was such a gift to have somebody love you on that level that only he could, because I wouldn't have cared if it was anyone else.
Yeah.
And so I think having an ego is important. I think it's good, but you also have to have people around you that love you enough, and you have to be willing enough or humble enough to just accept that criticism and those, that teaching and whatever it might look like, to be able to just keep yourself in check. And so for me, I'm super grateful. I have friends that I trust 100%. And they are so open with me, and I'm open with them. We tell each other when something's not on, they'll sit me down, or we'll go for a walk and we'll just talk about it. And so I think having people around you that love you and that you love and that you're safe enough with, that you guys can talk to each other openly. And this is part of the reason why the men's group works so well, is just having this environment where we will absolutely be your biggest supporter, but we're not afraid to call you on the bullshit either. And I think if you have that combination, it's very healthy. I think when you get in trouble, what I've seen people that get in trouble with their ego is when they kick out the people in their life that disagree with them, and they only have yes men around them. And so they don't have anyone to keep them in check. And I think that's the key to keeping a healthy ego.
Yeah. Yeah, because if no one's going to stop you and everyone's going to tell you everything you do, it's like, absolutely, you should do this. Yes, you can do it. Yes, 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 yes. You start to think that there's nothing I can't do, which is it's not really a bad belief to have. I mean, you should have the belief that like I can do anything I put my mind to, but you almost start to think that you're untouchable. And was that somewhat of where your brothers saw you headed, where like you was having a great amount of success?
Yeah, they saw me headed down a path where they were like, ultimately this guy's going to make some decisions they can't come back from, right? And I've seen it with plenty of my friends, guys that started in well-meaning, but ended up committing fraud or ending up in a bad place, ended up cheating on their wives, whatever it might have been. And because they get to this place where it's like, instead of just being willing to go, I don't know what to do here, or I screwed up, or, this was a failure. Now I need, my investors lost their money. Like, instead of just taking that loss, they think to themselves, well, I know everything or I can fix anything. And so if I can just get a win now, then that'll take care of this thing. So they end up doing shady things. And next thing they know, they're going to prison. I've seen this multiple times happen to people that I used to be close with. And I'm just like, damn, that's the ego where it gets you in trouble, where you're not willing to just go, you know what, I lost here. Like I'm in trouble here and I need help. And I think that's why.
Well, I think what can happen is as I've went on my healing journey, my ego came back. You know, I might have defeated it, then brought it back to life. But then I started working alongside it. Then I started thinking that I was making these giant leaps and strides. I was getting validation from people online. Wow, this guy has completely changed everything up. You know, he's really insightful now. He says a lot of great things. And I started to think that, okay, maybe I've jumped into this upper echelon of intelligence. You know, so then I started having these thoughts of I'm above some of these people, and like I can see stuff ahead of when they can. So therefore, I started having these thoughts of maybe I can do some of these things, and they won't see it right out the gate, but I can make it right. I can make things work. But they don't get it. They don't have the mental fortitude or the awareness to be able to understand. What really resonated with me was when you said, one of your brothers sent you a message and it was like, where did this come from? I thought you were a dunce, like for lack of better words. I thought the same thing with one of my brothers in particular, and he knows which one I'm referencing. But he didn't seem to ever care and talk about mental health and have these deep conversations. And then one day we were leaving church and I just kind of bled out. I started talking to him right as we were standing by my car and he's about to walk to his. And he's like, let's like sit in the car real quick. Let's get out of the sun. And we sat in the car and he was insightful to a level I've never thought existed. And I just remember like having an hour conversation with him. And at the end of it, I drove off and I was like, my ego told me that I was like years ahead of him. Mm-hmm. But there's insight here that I had no idea he possessed. Mm-hmm. Why did my ego was completely off. Why did I think that like he was so far behind? And so then I had to start thinking like, maybe I'm not as far ahead as I thought. Mm-hmm. I'm giving myself too much credit, right? Because then I started to think that I could be like the preacher, like I can teach you. But the problem is it's like, how many steps ahead am I really? And then they started seeing as like, he thinks he's better. I started, pushing that off where I was like, I'm preaching to them. You guys don't get this. And so I started realizing like my family, I'm like, no, you guys don't get it. So I started to distance myself from them. And then I started distancing myself from love. And I felt more separated than ever. And then I couldn't figure out what the void was. And it's like the void was I was taking unconditional love and pushing it away. Damn. All because my ego just was like, they don't get you. And it's like, no, you don't really get yourself. You don't understand what you're doing. So it's like the ego can get really dangerous. And that's where you have to have those checks and balances where they can call you out and have the right people in your corner. So Jimmy, where are you at today as far as, do you have it all figured out?
Oh, definitely not. No. The number one thing in my program that I say, bro, is like the last thing that anybody joins is that I would ever say is you should live your life like me. The whole thing is designed for one reason, to help you become the best version of you. Mm-hmm. And all I'm doing is helping you learn different skills and things that help you connect better to yourself. Yeah. And the last thing anybody should do is try to be the next me, man. I go to seminars and conferences still 5 or 6 times a year. Mm-hmm. I'm still studying vigorously. I've gotten to this place where, I'm very happy with the progress that I've made. I'm very happy with where I'm at, but also like very aware of like, wow, like the things I don't realize or things I don't know. And, I kind of believe there's no right way to do life. And so for me, it's just this, I just want to be the best version of myself. And that's my mission. And for me, I've had to put a lot more in than most people probably do. But ultimately, no, man. And we never figure this life out. The second you think that you're the smartest guy in the room, you're either in the wrong room or you've got to really check yourself. And so it's fun to just be humbled left and right over and over again, you know, and I think that that's part of the fun of life is that we're never going to figure this whole thing out. We're not supposed to.
Right. Exactly. Because I had someone tell me equate it to a video game. If once you beat the game at 100% completion, do you play it again? If you already know the outcome and there's nothing left to win and achieve and get better at, then you decide, I don't want to play that video game. Well, it's the same thing with life. I think we always need to have something to be working towards, another side quest, another more percentages of the game to get closer to the finish, but never actually do it. What's right now biggest area of improvement? If you had to take a check on yourself, and you're like, hey, here's something that I'm currently focusing on, what would that be for you?
Yeah, the thing I've been working the hardest on for the last year is it's called embodiment work, and it's basically being more present, being more grounded, being less reactionary.
Okay.
And so doing a lot of, it's like meditation. It's like staring in the mirror and looking into your eyes and saying what, to yourself, what you see and what you feel.
Yeah.
Being able to just be more connected to your body, spending a lot of time in silence and solace and not having your phone and things like that, and just allowing the secrets of the universe to come into you. And, I went to a 3-day event literally in Sayulito, Mexico a couple of weeks ago. And like, we're just staring at the ocean on the beach for like an hour at a time and just trying to allow life to just be and not, always be rushed with everything. And I think that's the thing I'm working on the most. It's been awesome. It's part of like growing up. I had a very high charged nervous system. I grew up in a pretty chaotic house, and you do that to survive, but ultimately it doesn't necessarily bring you happiness, and you can be unfortunately very reactive to when things happen and usually make the wrong decision when we do that. And so that's the thing I'm working the most on right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's been fun. It's just like every day, just, taking time to go on walks, and, the cold plunge does that. It's anytime your body's screaming that you want to change or get out of a situation, and you can sit in the heat or sit in that uncomfortability, then you're starting to grow in this area. And so those are the things I'm working the most on.
Yeah. Have you had major breakthroughs sitting in the silence? Is there anything that pops up top of head? So like whether it's staring out at the ocean for an hour, or whether it's 15 minutes of meditation, there's a part of me that has been hesitant to do meditation because I think I'm going to sit in silence for the next 15 to 30 minutes. And what if nothing comes up? Or what if something just like, oh, I feel this way, but it's not anything paramount. Did I just spend 30 minutes sitting and doing nothing?
Yeah.
That's what's been really hard for me and that's why I'm hesitant to meditate. So whether it's you or someone else, I mean, have you heard of paramount, like massive change occurring in the silence?
Yeah. I mean, and if you think about the hedonic treadmill where, it's like we need this more and more stimulus to be fulfilled or to be happy, you start thinking about dopamine and how easy it is to get dopamine today hits, right? Whether it's food, you get any food delivered to your door in 20 minutes from some college kid. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's, just getting the high of looking at social media or, all those kind of things that we do or whatever it might be. And so when you start to look at it that way and you go, look, I just want to reset my own system, this dopamine. There's a really good book called Dopamine Nation. And it just talks about this, how the more we're able to make ourselves uncomfortable or be bored and do these things, it's really good for us. And so when you change your attitude of like, did I just waste 30 minutes to like, no, I'm just going to reset that, meter that's going on inside of me that needs more dopamine. I mean, I got to the point I had season tickets to the Utah Jazz basketball front row for 5 years in a row. And I got to the point where I didn't even enjoy going to the games. Like I'd see that there was a game that day and I'd be bugged that I had to go. Like front row, we're talking, right? The dream as a kid. Yeah, of course. And then I was like, I've been, like to over 100 countries, and you're traveling, you're in the most beautiful place in the world, and you're just like, do I really have to see another freaking temple, in Asia? And so I think what happens is you start to, and in the Stoics, they talk about this all the time, Marcus Aurelius and the rest of them, but it's like, it's not about needing more. It's about truly being happy with less. And I think if we're willing to be bored, if we're willing to sit in the silence and reset our own, meter here, I think it's going to benefit us in so many ways. You start taking pleasure in a conversation with a child again. You start taking pleasure in just being with yourself, going for a walk and doing some of these things. When you get as much pleasure out of doing that as it takes to go do something crazy or exotic, then I think you're winning life a lot better. And I think the danger that we live in today's society is it is so easy to get those dopamine spikes, but ultimately they don't bring you happiness. That's why so many people, even though they're surrounded by, the average 22-year-old in the world today literally lives better, if you look at every possible thing that you could gauge this on, than the king of the world did 150 years ago, but they're probably miserable. Yeah. It's because they've totally screwed up this scale. And so resetting it through boredom and I go into silence like once a week and just sit in nature, dude. And I have I had these breakthroughs where like God came and talked to me? No. Have I had like these downloads where it changed everything in my life? Like kind of, but not really. But ultimately what it does is it just, my overall happiness level, I can tell it's better and higher. And I'm catching more pleasure in the simple things than I used to ever before.
Man, you just worded that in the way that I need to hear it to do it. And in fact, like just the way you said that is enough to basically give me the green light where I'm like, I need to start meditating, because I was thinking that meditation was meant for me to have some massive revelation. But really what I struggle with is dopamine just dumps. And especially coming off reality television. And then every time I post a video on social media, I get massive dopamine hits by the amount of views and likes and comments, and I'm able to seek dopamine and get it quickly. I mean, with everybody else, like on social media, I have that avenue, and then I have dating apps, and then I go on dates, and like there's probably not a day that goes by where I genuinely don't spike my dopamine, right? And because I have the ability and the access and resources to do so some way, somehow, I can jump on a plane and take a trip whenever I want. Or I can, self-medicate. I can, get high off of, marijuana and then eat a pizza and then dump dopamine that way. And I've done all these things, but the problem is that I then was just having a conversation with someone and I said, I can't flow. I can't just ride the current. I want the tidal waves. I'm totally fine with getting crashed out and knocked underwater and come up gasping for air, as long as I can ride the high of the wave. And I was like, I think that's what I'm meant to do, is just ride these massive like highs and lows. Because I went last 3 months where I cut out all the drugs, I cut out all the partying, and I dialed in, and I was so focused. But then I was bored. I wasn't really even bored. It wasn't even boredom. It was just like complacency.
Well, I got that place where, every time I got in a relationship, because I've been on 1,000 first dates. I've done everything you can imagine to go do is for fun. And it got to the point where it was like, I couldn't just enjoy being in a relationship. I felt like so bored, or like I wasn't doing enough. And so I said, I need to change. And so I've worked so hard on this the last year. Like I wanted when I got in my next relationship that nothing changed.
Yeah.
Like, so I started just forcing myself to just live in the stillness, and it works, dude. It's like really crazy. Like I can just be now and not need my life to have these crazy highs and crazy lows, and we're like, friggin' everyone just was like, Jimmy's just a psycho for adrenaline. It's like, well, no, it's just, I had screwed my system up so bad. It was the only way I could feel alive.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you spoke to that perfectly.
Dude. Yeah. Cause really what you're doing is you're resetting, your gratification meter as far as the balance between instant and delayed gratification.
100%.
And so here I am going for instant gratifiers. And it's like, if you really want to get back to that balance, sit in silence, and you'll start appreciating, the stillness of life. And all of a sudden, 1 hour won't be an hour that I wasted. It's like I got to appreciate an hour, and just be able to relax and be in this moment. And there is no rush in life. I'll get to that point B or F or D whenever I'm going to get to that point. I don't have to get there faster than the person next to me just because I watched them do it online. It's like, I'll get there when I'm supposed to get there. So meditation, the way that you spoke it into my soul just now, is like, meditation's meant for you to be able to balance the instant versus delayed gratification. And where I'm at in my life, I've been chasing instant gratifiers, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, I just need to, I need to have like a balance of instant. It's like, sure, you can still have instant gratifiers, but how delayed is your life? As far as how many delayed gratifiers do I have? And the answer is probably like none. I was living my life the last 3 years with instant gratification.
Yeah. And if you're anything like me, you're probably just trying to avoid sitting with your own feelings. So you justify it with being busy or being excited or having fun or doing all these different things. But really what it is we're trying to avoid just feeling ourselves. And so I would be willing to bet as you start to do that, some uncomfortable things are going to come up, but as they do, and you can sit and start loving those pieces of you. Like for me, I know it was like, I loved all the things about me, except the pain, except for the weaknesses, like the things about me that I'm not good at, the things I suck at, the things that make me weak, that I get sad, that I get lonely, all those kinds of things. And when I started realizing that, I need to actually sit with these feelings, I need to love these feelings. And then I could do that. It became this totally different human being. It just changed everything for me. So,
and like I'm getting this discomfort right now because I'm basically, my ego is jumping in right now, and it's saying in my head, no, you were bored. Like you didn't feel anything. So like, you want to feel something. We already discussed this. Like, this is what's going on in my head right now. It's like, we already discussed this. You need to have a balance. You need to get high once a weekend and eat some pizza and relax and like go on a date. And you gotta do those things. Just don't overdo it. We were overdoing it, but it's like, and deep down, it's like, no, you need to go back to that place of the 3 months. You just didn't give it enough time. And my ego convinced me, it's like, well, you weren't feeling anything during that time. It's like, maybe I was, though. I was getting on the cusp of of pulling out something more. And then I told myself, no, I got to have something. I'm riding this wave. Like, I need to ride a wave. I don't need to, like, this current is just too boring. There's nothing to life. I'm not hot, neither hot nor cold. And I said this wasn't good for me. So I justified it and said, don't do that. Now I need to find the balance. So now I'm going back into like, well, maybe I should go back to that place, but I can now feel that ego telling me like, you don't want to go back there.
And it'll lie to you. The craziest things, like when I started, I took, a sabbatical for a couple months, and the ego starts lying to you in every way it can. It's like, dude, you got to get back out there. Girls aren't going to like you anymore. Your friends are going to ditch you. They don't even invite you to the parties anymore. Like you used to be somebody.
Yeah, why do you think that is? They don't.
Nobody will ever like you again. And you're like, wait, is this true? And then you're like, no, it's not. But your ego, it's crazy, dude. It's trying to keep you alive. So
it's like, well, if you haven't been seen, Clayton, then no one's going to know you exist anymore. It's like they still do know that you exist. So the ego and its lies, man. I love that we jumped on that. I haven't had really an ego discussion so far with any guests on not in depth. And I think, again, I love that, like, I just can feel the energy and know that, like, hey, this person's, willing to have this discussion. And especially as two men, like, ego and men go hand in hand. I think women have a better grasp on their egos, and so I think that's where we have to, as men, understand that it's like, we're not one and the same. It's a part of us, but it's not all of us. So we actually can work alongside it, but you have to have a separation of it and understand, like, I'm not all of my ego. that's just one part of me, right? Then there's the conscious and subconscious mind. And so then you start diving into, I'm learning all that. Now there's shadow work that I'm doing that I'm not, at a place of having an intellectual conversation with, but I'm like, hey, there's shadow work that I have to pay attention to. It's the alter ego. And so it's really cool when you start breaking it all down, because you're like, how can I make, all of this marriage together and exist as one, but understand that I'm a complex human being and I'm a man that's not just one being, but like an entity with multiple parts. And I think you start to appreciate that you're multifaceted.
Yeah.
And you're not just a man, you're a man with like a lot of complexity, which makes you unique and makes you one of one. And that's the one I carry, the 1 in a billion mindset. I'm like, I am 1 in a billion. And maybe that's not even giving me enough credit, because maybe I'm just one in the entire world.
Sure. One of
one, right? Go back to the 1 of 1. So Jamie, this was an incredible conversation. I know I could talk for hours. I mean, we scratched the surface on so many other topics that we could dive into. So it just means we'll have to have further conversations down the road. But for those that want to continue following you in your journey and dive deeper into what it is you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, I send everything on through my Instagram. So Mr. Jimmy Rex on Instagram. And I post, anytime I'm doing events or have a new podcast, wherever I'm doing, that's where I send it. So that's the best place to follow me, Mr. Jimmy Rex. I appreciate you, man. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jimmy.